Stuart Varney spoke to Steve Forbes on Fox Business Network, and they're going to go after AOC here. Now, we're critical of AOC. I think strategically she's a mess. I think she's weak. I think it's easy to co-opt her. She's kind of naive. But having said all that, every now and then she says something that's perfectly reasonable, and then all of right-wing media melts down and attacks her in the most vociferous and absurd way imaginable. Well, this is a perfect example of that right here. So Stuart Varney and Steve Forbes are going to go after her, and let's watch, and then I'll give you the facts.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez blames corporate America for fueling inflation. I'll give you a quote, Steve. Here it is. There's a real distinction to be made between inflation and price gouging. A lot of these price increases are potentially due to just straight price gouging by corporations. You want to take that on, Steve Forbes?
Well, I'm talking about gouging. How about gouging taxpayers on your student debts? Well, we'll leave that aside for the moment and go to her point. No, there isn't price gouging. You may find certain instances of it. But anytime you have inflation, they always look for scapegoats. I've mentioned the Christians in the Roman times. They blame the Christians. They blame witches during medieval times. Now they blame evil and price gouging corporations. No, it's bad government policy. Whether it's the disastrous way they handled supply chains, printing too much money, spending too much money, those were inflicted by the government, not by businesses.
Could not be more smug and could not be more wrong. In fact, look at the facts. So this is from Insider. Corporations are using inflation as an excuse to raise prices and make fatter profits, and it's making the problem worse. That's from Insider. We also have a brilliant piece from Matt Stoller that you can see on the screen right now. Corporate profits drive 60% of inflation increases. Higher prices aren't just a result of supply chain chaos or government spending. Inflation is being driven by the pricing power and higher profits of corporations, costing $2,126 per American. So, let me give you the gist of this. This is how this works. We get a little bit of inflation. The media flips out and covers it nonstop, and then sensationalizes and fearmongers a little bit. Corporations, sensing and realizing that the media is panicking over inflation, then uses the fear of inflation to raise prices and blame inflation even for goods that aren't affected by inflation. Now, me saying, this isn't my opinion. This is a fact. And it was reported by a number of outlets that these guys themselves would consider reputable outlets. They might not agree with Matt Stoller because he's a big anti-monopolist and they're pro-monopoly. But the Business Insider report, that's a source that I'm sure they've used previously. So it absolutely is true. But see, they go back to the same boogeyman. As they accuse Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of doing that, that's what they do. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's boogeyman happens to actually be a boogeyman. And she's correct to point it out. Their boogeyman is nonsense. What's their boogeyman? Oh, big government spending bad. Big government spending bad. Okay, except we know that the big government spending had nothing to do with inflation, because there's a number of reasons for the inflation. The most important thing is the supply chain crisis. Because of the COVID pandemic, people staying home and ordering more stuff, online. You got, it's a global economy now. Things get shipped in from overseas, and so everything just got clogged up. It also got clogged up because there were lockdowns in other countries. I mean, China has a zero COVID approach, for example. So stuff takes longer to get here. The ports are clogged. They're trying desperately to fix that problem, but they haven't really fixed that problem. And so that's one thing that's leading to inflation. Another thing is, and this is tied to that, you don't have manufacturing in the U.S. So, like, if you built up our manufacturing capacity, then you wouldn't have as much inflation because you wouldn't have the supply chain crisis, because the supply chain could be the state next to you. You don't have to go through a clogged port in order to deliver the goods. So there's not enough U.S. manufacturing. That's another part of the problem. Now, notice, the solutions to the problems I just mentioned are what? Leftist policies, like busting up the monopolies and like bringing back U.S. manufacturing. They would never admit this because this doesn't fit their political ideology. And then corporate greed is the other thing, as you know, which I just described to you, which is they're using the fear of inflation to then just raise prices and blame inflation, even though it's not inflation. So, they couldn't be more wrong. And then final thing is when he takes that random shot at student debt. He compares student debt to price gouging. He's like, oh, you're going to price gouge the taxpayers to pay off your student debt? Where's my top hat? Would he say that about high school and the way high school is funded right now? That's how public high school is funded. It's funded through tax dollars. Would he say that about elementary school, public elementary school, or public kindergarten? Would he say, ha ha ha, little Timmy, I know you're a toddler who's going to school, but you're price gouging me as a taxpayer. Where's my monocle and my pipe? This is not a pipe. This is way cooler than a pipe. No disrespect to pipe smokers. I got the vape all in the way. Anyway, yeah. The idea of free college, free higher education, including free trade school, by the way, which is another thing I support, is just giving people equal opportunity. And by the way, it pays for itself in the long run and then some. Because when you invest in think of it as an investment in the population. And then when you invest in the population, later on, they end up making more money and they end up paying more in taxes. So it's better for everybody. It's better for everybody. Of course, these guys would look at just fundamental basics in a modern civilized society and they say, that's price gouging. Any social democratic programs, I guarantee you they would say the same thing about universal health care. It's price gouging to make sure that you can get that new kidney and not go bankrupt. God, I don't know how anybody watches this. And look, there's a new contingent on the right, at least among the voters and of the base, that like to fancy themselves, like populist. Like, no, I'm like pro-working class, but on the right. Okay, fair enough. I'll take you at your word. So what do you think of these guys? What do you think of these guys? Defending corporations at all costs, no matter how wrong they happen to be. This is not populism. This is elitism 101, and it's obvious. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.